Welcome to episode 22 of The Deep Dive.
Welcome to episode 22.
Okay, so, when you look back at history, and there are all these moments where things just fall apart, like these civilizations that were on top of the world, they suddenly crumble, it makes you wonder if there's some kind of cosmic reset button that gets pushed every few millennia.
That's a fascinating thought.
Yeah, or it's some hidden hand rearranging the pieces on the game board.
Well, while the idea of these grand unified collapses is definitely compelling, I think our goal on this deep dive is to really explore the specific factors and events that led to these significant societal transformations.
Right, get into the nitty-gritty.
Exactly, and see what emerges from the evidence.
So let's talk about the Bronze Age collapse, which happened around 3,200 years ago across the Mediterranean and the Near East.
Okay.
You had all these really sophisticated cultures just vanishing like that.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, the Mycenaeans, the Hittites, all gone in the blink of an eye, historically speaking, of course.
Right.
And they even lost the ability to write in some places, like the ancient internet went down, and nobody could figure out how to reboot it.
The Bronze Age collapse was definitely a period of widespread societal disruption. And yeah, the archaeological record shows this pattern of destruction, abandonment of major urban centers, and a clear break in those established cultural practices.
Right, it's like somebody hit the off switch.
Yeah, and the loss of writing systems in some regions really underscores how severe this breakdown was in societal organization and communication.
Now, the old story that we always hear is about invaders, right? The Egyptians, who managed to hang on a bit longer, they wrote about these mysterious sea peoples showing up and causing all kinds of trouble.
Right.
It sounded like a simple case of barbarians at the gate end of story.
Yeah, the Egyptian accounts, particularly from the reign of Ramses III, definitely feature the sea peoples very prominently as a significant threat, a source of destruction. And that narrative really did influence early interpretations of the Bronze Age collapse.
Right, it's the classic underdog story.
Exactly. But, as we've done more archaeological research and developed a deeper understanding of the late Bronze Age world, I think it points to a more complex scenario than just straightforward invasions.
So it's not as simple as it seems.
Exactly.
Because these Bronze Age societies, they weren't just isolated, they were all connected, right? By trade diplomacy, even royal marriages. It was a real international scene back then.
Yeah, it was a very interconnected world.
It's hard to imagine that they were so globally entangled back then.
I know, it's fascinating, right? The late Bronze Age was characterized by this high degree of interconnectedness between the major powers, and we have evidence of this through things like the Amarna letters, which were diplomatic correspondences that reveal these intricate political relationships, alliances, rivalries.
So they were basically texting each other on clay tablets.
Yeah, kind of. And the extensive trade in raw materials and finished goods shows this really well-established economic network that spanned vast distances across the Mediterranean and the Near East.
So it's almost like a proto-globalization.
In a way, yeah. And this interconnectedness, while it brought prosperity, also created systemic vulnerabilities.
Right, so it's a double-edged sword.
Exactly.
And at the heart of this whole system was bronze, the wonder metal of the age. But to make bronze, you needed copper, which mostly came from Cyprus, and tin, which came from as far away as Afghanistan. Can you believe that?
It's incredible the lengths they went to.
I talk about relying on long-distance supply chains.
Right, and if one link breaks, the whole system can be affected.
Exactly. So it wasn't just one bad guy rocking the boat.
No.
It was this whole delicate system that was just teetering on the edge. And maybe a bunch of different things pushed it over.
That's the idea behind the perfect storm theory.
Right, the perfect storm.
Yeah, where you have these climate shifts, internal unrest, maybe even earthquakes all happening at once.
It definitely sounds more plausible than just one wave of invaders wiping everyone out.
I agree. The perfect storm theory suggests that the Bronze Age collapse was likely the result of multiple interconnected factors converging and making those existing vulnerabilities even worse.
So it was like death by 1,000 cuts.
Kind of, yeah. And it wasn't just a single cause. It was this interplay of environmental changes, social and political stresses, conflicts, disruptions to trade networks. It all just overwhelmed these complex societies.
And then you have these climate scientists digging around, looking at pollen in old lake beds, and they found out that right when all these Bronze Age cities were getting sacked, there was this massive drought that lasted for decades.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
It makes you think those sea peoples might have been more like climate refugees just looking for water.
That's a really interesting perspective. And the pollen analysis from lake sediments like the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee really does reveal this significant and prolonged period of dryness in the Levant.
So it wasn't just a little dry spell.
No, it started around 1250 BC and lasted for a couple of centuries, and the evidence suggests a substantial decrease in rainfall during this time, which obviously would have had a huge impact on agriculture and water resources.
People probably got desperate.
Absolutely, and that could have contributed to migrations and conflicts.
And this wasn't just a local thing, right? Evidence of this mega drought was found in Turkey and Syria, too.
That's right, it was a regional phenomenon.
Even those letters between the Hittite kings and the Egyptian pharaohs started to make more sense with all their pleas for grain. It really paints a picture of a widespread environmental crisis.
It does, and the evidence for a regional climate crisis during the Late Bronze Age keeps growing with data from Lake Van in Turkey and other sites in the Near East.
So this drought was the real deal.
It was, and it wasn't just the land that was affected.
What do you mean?
Well, scientists who were looking at ancient plankton in the Mediterranean found that the sea suddenly got colder around this time.
Really?
Yeah, and colder water means less evaporation, which means less rain. So it's like the whole weather system glitched out.
Wow. The ancient world sounds like a wild place.
It was, and there are some theories that this was caused by melting glaciers or even blasts of cold air coming from Siberia.
So ancient weather was seriously unpredictable.
It seems that way. Yeah, the analysis of those ancient plankton fossils in the seabed cores does indicate this period of rapid cooling of sea surface temperatures right around the time of the Late Bronze Age collapse.
So it all lines up.
It does, and this cooling would have definitely led to less rainfall across the region.
And less rain means less food, less water, more conflict. It's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And the precise causes of this cooling are still being investigated, but it's a fascinating puzzle.
And then there's these stalagmites in a cave in Greece that basically blew the case wide open.
Oh, yeah, the stalagmites. What about them?
Well, these stalagmites, they're like these underground formations that record rainfall over thousands of years.
Right.
And they show these super precise records of droughts in Greece, including one really intense dry period that lines up perfectly with the collapse of the Mycenaean cities.
It's like Mother Nature left a detailed log of what happened.
I know, right? It's amazing. So it's like the smoking gun.
It really is. The stalagmite analysis from Mavri Trippa Cave in southern Greece provides this incredibly detailed and precisely dated record of past rainfall, and the data shows a pattern of these recurring dry periods, which then culminates in a particularly severe and long-lasting drought that happens right at the same time as the decline of those Mycenaean centers.
It's like the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, it provides really strong evidence for the role of climate change in the Bronze Age collapse.
Now, Egypt, they were the survivors of the Bronze Age, right? But even they were feeling the pressure.
Oh, absolutely.
Ramses III was fighting off these sea peoples while also dealing with this major drought. At the same time, talk about bad timing.
I know, right? It was a tough time to be pharaoh, and they even tried to increase food production in Canaan, like they knew things were getting desperate.
It sounds like they were trying everything they could.
They were, and while Egypt did manage to weather the storm better than many of its neighbors, it still faced these really significant challenges during the reign of Ramses III.
It's like they were holding on for dear life.
Pretty much, and the archaeological evidence points to their efforts to secure those food supplies in Canaan, probably in response to the changing climate.
But even the mighty Nile, their lifeline, started acting strange.
What happened?
Well, the riverbanks were shrinking in Nubia, and there's even evidence that it might have dried up in some places.
That's concerning.
Yeah, and back in Egypt, workers weren't getting paid, which led to the first recorded strike.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and there was a spike in tomb robbing, which is never a good sign.
It sounds like even the top dog was starting to wobble.
Exactly. So maybe those sea peoples weren't just the bad guys. Maybe they were also victims of this climate catastrophe, forced to migrate in search of survival.
That's a really thought-provoking point, and it challenges the traditional good guy versus bad guy narrative.
Right, history is never black and white.
It's full of shades of gray, and the reinterpretation of the sea peoples suggests that their movements were likely driven by this mix of factors, including the drought and famine.
So they were just trying to make the best of a bad situation.
It seems that way, yeah. And seeking more stable lands and resources would have been a natural response to such extreme environmental pressure.
It makes you wonder how many other historical migrations were driven by climate change.
That's a great question for another deep dive.
Definitely. But let's get back to the Bronze Age. So the end of the Bronze Age wasn't a gentle fade out. It was more like a crash landing.
Oh, yeah. How so?
We see evidence of sieges, overcrowding in cities like Megiddo.
Yeah.
Must have been chaotic.
It sounds intense.
Yeah. And eventually Egypt had to pull out of Canaan. They couldn't hold on any longer. And then there were palace conspiracies, assassinations. It was a messy
A
end.
lot of drama.
Yeah, and it led to what's called the Dark Age,
Yeah.
where a lot of knowledge and cultural sophistication was lost. It's like the ancient world hit the reset button, but in a really bad way.
That's a good way to put it. The archaeological evidence from sites like Megiddo really does point to this period of upheaval with signs of siege and conflict, and Egypt's withdrawal from Canaan was a major shift in power.
It was like the end of an era.
It was, and the Dark Age that followed wasn't necessarily a time of violence or chaos everywhere, but we do see a significant decline in literacy, large-scale building projects, and detailed historical records compared to the Bronze Age.
So it was more like a cultural blackout?
Kind of, yeah, and the internal instability, as seen in the conspiracy against Ramses III, further emphasizes the turmoil of this period.
It was like a domino effect, one thing after another.
Exactly.
But this wasn't the first time the planet threw a curveball, was it?
No, not at all. There have been other climate events throughout history.
Like the 4.2 K&E event in Egypt.
Right, that was a major drought that happened about 4,200 years ago.
And it was so bad that people could supposedly walk across the Nile.
That's what they say, and it really highlights how vulnerable even these seemingly powerful societies are to these sudden shifts in climate.
Humbling to think about.
It is. And research suggests that these rapid climate change events have happened periodically throughout history, often coinciding with significant societal changes.
So it's like a recurring pattern.
It seems that way, and these events are characterized by shifts in global atmospheric circulation, which lead to colder poles and drier conditions around the equator.
It's fascinating how interconnected everything is.
It is, and it makes you wonder what other climate events have shaped human history.
Definitely. But even after these collapses, something new always emerges like a phoenix rising from the ashes.
That's a great analogy.
So after the Bronze Age collapsed, the Iron Age dawned. The climate warmed up a bit. Population started to grow. New trade routes popped up. And iron became the metal of the people, not just the elites.
It was a time of renewal and innovation.
Exactly. Like technology and a bit of sunshine helped humanity get back on its feet.
And the wider availability of iron ore and the development of ironworking technology really did change things because it allowed for more people to have access to metal tools and weapons.
It was a game changer.
It was, and a warmer climate also likely helped increase food production and population growth.
So things were looking up.
They were, and this period also saw the rise of the Greeks.
The Greeks, they were everywhere, weren't they?
They were spreading out, setting up colonies all across the Mediterranean and the Black Sea.
Especially in places with reliable rainfall.
That's right. They knew the importance of water.
And then you have Athens rising to power, fueled by silver mines, and a navy to import grain. They were a force to be reckoned with.
They were, and their rise was really facilitated by those silver mines at Laurion, which allowed them to finance their powerful navy and import grain from other regions.
So they could overcome the limitations of their own environment.
Exactly, and some scholars even believe that the development of democracy in Athens was linked to the fact that rainfall was more dispersed, which made it harder for any one group to control all the resources.
That's really interesting.
It is, and it shows how environmental factors can even shape political systems.
And then you have Alexander the Great bursting onto the scene, creating these huge, well-supplied cities like Alexandria.
He was a game changer for sure.
And then the Romans followed with their strategic location, good resources, and that famous citizen army.
The Romans were master builders and organizers.
They were, and they really hit the jackpot with the Roman climatic optimum, which was a period of warmer, wetter conditions that was perfect for growing empires and grapes.
It was a good time to be a Roman, and the Roman climatic optimum really did provide this boost to their expansion and prosperity.
They had all the right ingredients for success.
They did, and you know those ice cores in Greenland, they tell a fascinating story about the Romans.
What do you mean?
Well, by analyzing the lead isotopes in the ice cores, scientists can actually track Roman silver mining activity in Iberia.
That's amazing.
It is, and it shows that there were boom times during the Republic and early Empire, but then there's a dip in lead pollution around the time of the Antonine Plague.
So even the ice cores tell us about Roman history.
They do, and it's a great example of how interdisciplinary research can shed light on the past.
And it's not just the plagues that show up in the ice cores. The lack of major volcanic eruptions in the first 2 centuries AD might have also helped keep the climate stable for the Romans.
That's right. They had a pretty good run when it came to climate stability.
It's like they were blessed by the gods.
Maybe so.
But the Romans weren't just lucky. They were also incredibly innovative, especially when it came to agriculture.
Oh, absolutely. They had those huge villas producing tons of wine oil and grain.
They were like the agricultural powerhouses of the ancient world.
They were, and they really revolutionized farming practices. But all that production came with a cost.
What do you mean?
Well, they became incredibly dependent on food imports, especially to feed the over 1 million people living in Rome.
Wow, that's a lot of mouths to feed.
It is, and it must have been a logistical nightmare to keep that city supplied.
And the sanitation, I can't even imagine.
It wasn't pretty. The combination of a huge population and limited sanitation led to high death rates in the city.
It's like a ticking time bomb.
In a way, it was, and the only way they could maintain their population was through constant immigration.
It sounds a bit like some of our modern megacities.
It does, doesn't it?
And then, of course, there's disease.
Right, disease was a constant threat in the Roman world.
They had endemic diseases like malaria.
And there's even evidence that there might have been a new, deadlier strain of malaria circulating during this time.
That's terrifying.
It was. And then there was the Antonine Plague in the 2nd century AD, which was a devastating pandemic.
Yeah, that one really hit them hard.
It did, and it likely caused a significant decline in the population and disrupted the economy.
It's amazing how these tiny microbes can bring even the mightiest empires to their knees.
It is, and the Antonine Plague is thought to have been caused by smallpox or a related virus.
So it spread like wildfire through their interconnected world.
It did, and it highlights how vulnerable even the most advanced societies are to these invisible threats.
And as if plagues weren't enough, the climate also decided to throw another curveball right around the time the Roman Republic ended.
What happened?
Well, the North Atlantic Oscillation, which is this large-scale atmospheric pattern, got all wonky, and it led to some really extreme weather.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and some historians believe that this might have even pushed those Germanic tribes south, contributing to Rome's military problems.
That's fascinating.
It's like the weather itself was conspiring against them.
It seems that way, and shifts in these large-scale atmospheric patterns like the North Atlantic Oscillation can definitely cause significant changes in weather patterns.
So it's not just ancient history. These patterns are still relevant today.
Absolutely, and understanding how they work can help us prepare for future climate challenges.
So then we get to the crisis of the 3rd century, which was basically a century of chaos for the Roman Empire.
Oh yeah, that was a rough time.
Civil wars, invasions, the economy went haywire,
Mm-hmm.
and the climate was all over the place with crazy weather events. It's like everything was unraveling at once.
It was a perfect storm of problems.
Exactly. And it really put a strain on the empire.
It did, and it's remarkable that they managed to hold on as long as they did.
So what do?
Well, they ended up splitting the empire in two.
The East and the West.
Exactly. Constantine moved the capital to Constantinople in the east, and the Western Roman Empire basically started its long, slow decline.
It's like they were trying to triage the situation.
In a way, yeah, they were shifting their focus to the stronger part of the empire.
But it was still a sign that things were falling apart.
It was a turning point for sure.
And then just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the Justinianic plague hit in the 6th century.
Oh, yeah, that was another devastating pandemic.
It was caused by the same bacteria as the Black Death, and it started in Egypt and spread like crazy.
It's incredible how these pandemics can reshape the world.
I know. And there's even a theory that a cold snap, maybe caused by a volcanic eruption, might have messed with rat and flea populations, making the plague even worse.
That's a chilling thought.
It is, and it just goes to show how interconnected everything is.
It really does, and the Justinianic plague had some serious long-term effects.
Like what?
Well, there were huge population drops.
Right.
Power shifted to the countryside, trade collapsed. It really reshaped the world.
So these invisible forces, disease, and climate, they've been shaping history for millennia.
It seems that way, and understanding these past events can give us a new perspective on our own present and future.
That's why we do these deep dives.
Exactly.
So what are some of the key takeaways from our look at the Bronze Age collapse and the Roman Empire?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that human history is not just about kings and battles and political intrigue.
It's about the environment, too.
Exactly. It's about this constant interplay between human societies and the natural world. And we've seen how even the most powerful empires can be brought down by things like climate change and disease.
It's a sobering thought.
It is. But it's also a reminder that we're not just passive observers of history, we're active participants in shaping our own destiny.
So what can we learn from these past events?
Well, I think one of the most important lessons is that we need to be aware of our own vulnerabilities.
Right. We can't just assume that we're immune to the forces that shape the past.
It's exactly. And we need to be prepared to adapt to a changing world.
So what do you think are the biggest threats facing our interconnected world today?
Well, that's a complex question, and there are many factors to consider, but I think climate change and pandemics are definitely two of the most pressing challenges we face.
And these are things that we can actually do something about.
Absolutely. If we act decisively and collectively, we can mitigate the risks and build a more resilient future.
Well said.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening. And remember, the past is not just a prologue, it's a guidebook.
And who knows, maybe the future is just another deep dive waiting to happen.
Until next time, stay curious.
And stay skeptical.
And maybe just a little bit paranoid.
Uh-huh.
You never know what's lurking out there.
True enough.
But seriously, folks, thanks for joining us on this journey through the ancient world. It's been a wild ride.
It has, and we hope you've learned something new.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the mysteries of the past.
Until then, keep exploring.
And keep questioning everything.
That's the spirit.
See you next time. Bye.